The Testing Initiative. The Galactic Armor Testing Facility stood as a testament to both technological achievement and interspecies cooperation. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Elena Martinez watched through reinforced observation windows as the latest batch of protective gear underwent rigorous evaluation. As the facility's lead researcher, she had overseen countless tests, but today was different. Today, they were testing equipment designed specifically for non-human species. Recording session 247A, Elena spoke into her data pad. Testing modified Mark 7 combat armor adapted for EEG physiology. She glanced at her colleague, Commander Zavor, whose deep red scales seemed to shimmer under the harsh laboratory lights. The tall EEG stood beside her, his three eyes focused intently on the testing chamber below. As the military liaison from the EEG conglomerate, Zavor had been instrumental in establishing this joint research initiative. His own combat experience aboard the human vessel Orion's bow had highlighted the critical need for better protective equipment for non-human crew members serving alongside humans. Beginning impact resistance trial, announced the automated system. In the chamber below, a robotic arm lifted a weighted pendulum. The test dummy, carefully constructed to match EEG skeletal structure and tissue density, waited silently in the new armor. The modifications to account for our dorsal ridge seem adequate, Zavor observed, his voice a low rumble. Though I'm concerned about mobility restrictions around the neck. Elena nodded, making additional notes. We've incorporated the flexible panels you suggested, but there's still work to be done on the joint transitions. The pendulum swung. The impact, precisely calibrated to simulate a glancing blow from a drachnid war axe, connected with the armor's shoulder section. Sensors throughout the dummy transmitted real-time data to the observation deck's monitors. Structural integrity at 92%, reported the system. Minor stress fractures detected in secondary padding layer. Elena frowned. Better than last time, but still not good enough. EEG shoulder joints are more vulnerable than human ones. We need to dash. An alert cut through the air, its urgent tone drawing both researchers' attention to the facility's main display screen. Priority message from Galactic Defense Command, announced the AI. The message was brief but concerning. A research vessel had gone dark in the Carina Nebula, its last transmission reporting an encounter with an unknown biological agent. The ship's crew included members from 6 different species, including humans and EEG. They're requesting our expertise, Elena said, scanning the details. Given our work on cross-species medical protocols. Zavor's scales shifted, a sign of agitation familiar to Elena after months of collaboration. The Carina Nebula. That's within range of the Drachnid expansion zone. If they're involved, then our armor testing just became even more relevant, Elena finished. She was already pulling up the vessel's specs on her tablet. The GSV Horizon, a mid-sized research ship with state-of-the-art containment facilities. Look at this, they were carrying samples from the ancient ruins on Proxima 7. The bioweapons development site. Zavor's middle eye widened slightly. I read the preliminary reports. The civilization that built those ruins had technology far beyond our current understanding of genetic manipulation. Elena began gathering her equipment. Command wants us on site within 48 hours. They're sending a fast response vessel. She paused, studying her colleague. This isn't just about the armor anymore, Zavor. If there's an unknown biological agent loose on that ship, then we need to understand how it affects different species, he nodded. And more importantly, how to protect against it. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Elena and Zavor compiled their research data, packed specialized equipment, and prepared for deployment. The armor testing would have to wait, but perhaps this mission would provide valuable real-world data they couldn't gather in the lab. As they boarded the response vessel, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something far more significant than improved armor designs. The Carina Nebula had always been a region of mysteries, its dense gases concealing ancient secrets and unknown dangers. "You're thinking about the Orion's bow incidents, aren't you?" she asked Zavor as they secured their gear in the ship's research bay. The EEG made a sound that Elena had learned to interpret as a rueful laugh. "Hard not to. Every time I thought I understood human resilience, something new would surprise me. But this." He gestured at their equipment. "This is different. We're not just observing anymore. We're actively working to bridge the gap between species." Elena nodded, checking the seals on her hazmat suit one final time. "That's what makes humans so adaptable, you know. We don't just survive, we learn, we modify, we improve. And now we're helping others do the same." The ship's engines hummed to life, and Elena felt the familiar sensation of artificial gravity engaging as they prepared for departure. On her tablet, the preliminary report from the Horizon continued to scroll, filled with medical data that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Multiple species living and working together in space had seemed impossible once too. Now it was routine, mostly. But as Elena reviewed the Horizon's crew manifest, she couldn't help but wonder if they were about to discover just how fragile that routine could be. "Tell me more about that giant insectoid you encountered," she said to Zavor as they settled in for the journey. The medical reports mentioned cellular regeneration rates unlike anything we'd seen before. As Zavor began to recount the story, Elena's mind was already racing ahead, analyzing potential connections. Whatever they found on the Horizon, she was certain of one thing: their understanding of interspecies medical science was about to be challenged in ways they couldn't imagine. Through the ship's viewport, the stars stretched into streaks of light as they entered FTL travel. Somewhere ahead, in the swirling purple depths of the Carina Nebula, a mystery awaited. And with it, perhaps, the key to understanding how different species could not just survive together, but thrive. The armor testing facility grew smaller behind them, its important work temporarily suspended. But Elena knew that what they learned on this mission would inform far more than just protective equipment design. It would shape the future of interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. As they approached their first jump point, Elena reviewed the mission parameters one last time. Search and rescue, biological containment, medical support. Simple objectives that could become incredibly complex when dealing with multiple species. But that complexity was exactly why she and Zavor had been chosen. Their work on understanding and adapting to different species' physical capabilities had made them the obvious choice for this mission. The question was, would that understanding be enough for whatever awaited them in the nebula? First contact. The Carina Nebula loomed before them, its vast clouds of purple and crimson gas creating ethereal patterns against the void of space. Elena stood on the bridge of the response vessel, watching as their pilot, Lieutenant Maya Chen, carefully navigated through the dense molecular clouds. Multiple contacts on long-range sensors, Maya reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Most appear to be standard nebula debris, but I'm detecting a large mass consistent with the Horizon signature. Zavor leaned forward, his three eyes narrowing as he studied the sensor readings. The energy output is irregular. Not consistent with standard operating procedures. Life support systems? Elena asked, already dreading the answer. Active, but fluctuating, Maya confirmed. Environmental controls are showing strange patterns. Temperature variations across different sections of the ship. Elena exchanged a glance with Zavor. They both knew what that could mean: quarantine protocols, emergency containment procedures, or worse. The EEG scales had taken on a darker hue, a physiological response to stress that Elena had learned to recognize during their months of research together. Incoming transmission, Maya announced suddenly. Audio only. The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with static and what sounded like breathing. No, Elena realized with a start. Not breathing. Something else. This is Chief Medical Officer Crow. GSV Horizon, the voice was distorted, but recognizable as belonging to a Drakend, one of the reptilian species known for their advanced biotechnology. Do not, repeat, do not dock. Containment has been compromised. Elena stepped forward. This is Dr. Elena Martinez, Galactic Defense Command Medical Division. We're here to help, Dr. Crow. What's your situation? More static, then, the samples, they were dormant, thought they were dead. But the human crew members, their presence triggered something. Some kind of recognition response. Recognition response? Zavor rumbled, his scientific curiosity evident despite the tension. From ancient bioweapons? Not weapons, Crow's voice became clearer, more urgent. Tools. They were tools for enhancement. The ruins, they weren't a weapons facility. They were a medical research station. Elena's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. The ancient civilization's supposed bioweapons, the human crew's unexpected reaction, the temperature fluctuations throughout the ship. Dr. Crow, she said carefully, are you saying these samples were designed to modify living organisms? Yes, no. It's more complex. They respond differently to each species. The humans, their adaptive immune systems, it's like the samples recognize something in their genetic code. But the rest of us. The transmission cut out abruptly. Maya's hands flew over the controls, trying to re-establish contact. Life sign readings are all over the place, the pilot reported. I'm detecting massive spikes in metabolic activity throughout the ship. Whatever's happening in there, it's accelerating. Elena turned to Zavor. We need to get aboard. If those samples are somehow interacting with different species' physiological systems. Agreed, the EEG nodded. But we do this carefully. Full containment protocols. And we need to be prepared for anything. If these really were medical tools rather than weapons. Then they might be trying to help whether we want them to or not, Elena finished. She was already heading for the research bay where their equipment was stored. Maya, find us a safe docking point. Preferably near the medical bay if you can. The next hour was spent in meticulous preparation. Elena and Zavor donned their latest prototype hazmat suits, designed to accommodate both human and EEG physiology. The suits incorporated elements from their armor research, including the flexible joint sections they'd been testing before the mission. Additional data from ship sensors, Maya's voice came through their suit comms. Temperature variations are following a pattern. Hottest areas correspond to sections with human crew members. Coolest areas match locations of Drakend crew. They're not just responding to presence, Zavor observed. They're actively altering the environment to match perceived optimal conditions for each species. Elena checked her medical scanner one final time. But why? What's the end goal? And more importantly, how do we stop it if we need to? The docking procedure was tense but successful. As the airlock cycled, Elena reviewed everything they knew about the ancient civilization that had built the ruins on Proxima 7. Advanced genetic manipulation, unprecedented understanding of cellular mechanics, and a mysterious disappearance that had left behind only fragments of their research. Ready? She asked Zavor as the airlock's inner door prepared to open. The EEG's response was interrupted by a sudden impact that shook the entire ship. Through the airlock's window, they could see something moving in the horizon's corridor. Something that shouldn't have been possible. The corridor's metal walls were shifting. Not melting or breaking, but actually changing their molecular structure. The surface rippled like liquid mercury, forming patterns that seemed almost organic. The ship itself, Zavor breathed. The samples aren't just affecting the crew. They're affecting everything. Elena's scanner was going haywire, detecting energy signatures unlike anything in its database. The ancient civilization, they weren't just researching biology. They were erasing the line between organic and inorganic matter. The airlock door slid open with a hiss, revealing a corridor that was more living tissue than spacecraft. The metal had transformed into something that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, responding to their presence like a nervous system. "Well," Elena said, trying to maintain her scientific detachment, "I guess we're about to learn a lot more about adaptation than we bargained for." They stepped forward together, their footsteps causing ripples of reaction through the transformed corridor. Somewhere ahead, they could hear sounds, not mechanical sounds, but not quite biological either. The horizon was becoming something new, something that straddled the boundary between machine and organism. And its crew, Elena realized with a mix of fascination and horror, might be undergoing similar changes. The question was, were they becoming something more than their original species, or were they losing themselves entirely? The answer, she suspected, lay somewhere in the ship's medical bay. If they could reach it before whatever was happening reached its completion phase. The corridor seemed to pulse in response to her thoughts, as if the ship itself was now aware of their presence and their intentions. "Forward," she said to Zavor. "Whatever's happening, we need to understand it. For the crew's sake, and for everything we've been working towards." The EEG nodded, his scaled hand tightening on his scanner. Together, they moved deeper into the transformed vessel, each step taking them further from known science and closer to whatever the ancient civilization had been trying to achieve. Behind them, the airlock sealed itself, its metal surface beginning to ripple and change. There would be no going back, at least, not until they understood what they were dealing with. The future of interspecies medical science might depend on what they discovered in the next few hours. Assuming, of course, they survived long enough to document their findings. Metamorphosis. The medical bay doors parted with a sound more akin to tearing flesh than mechanical movement. Elena's scanner registered increasingly complex energy patterns emanating from the transformed surfaces around them. What had once been sterile metal walls now pulsed with veins of bioluminescent material, creating an eerie network of living circuitry. "Movement ahead," Zavor warned, his three eyes adapting to the dim, organic lighting. "Multiple signatures, but they're inconsistent with any known species parameters." Elena adjusted her scanner settings, trying to make sense of the readings. The biomass seems to be integrating with existing cellular structures, but it's not just copying or replacing, it's enhancing. They entered the medical bay and froze. The scene before them defied conventional biology. Captain James Chen of the Horizon, Maya's brother, Elena remembered with a start, was suspended in what appeared to be a cocoon of living metal. His form was visible through the translucent surface, but it was changing, adapting in ways that should have been impossible. His skeletal structure, Zavor observed, moving closer with his scanner. "It's being reinforced. Some kind of metallic lattice growing through the bone tissue. Like the armor we were designing," Elena realized. But instead of external protection, it's internal enhancement. She moved to one of the bay's diagnostic terminals, finding it partially transformed but still functional. "Look at these readings, his cellular regeneration rate has increased exponentially." A sound from the other side of the bay drew their attention. Dr. Crow, the Drakened medical officer they'd spoken to earlier, emerged from what appeared to be a similar cocoon. But unlike the captain, his transformation had taken a different path. The samples, Crow's voice had changed, becoming more resonant. "They're not just tools, they're templates. The ancient ones, they weren't trying to create weapons. They were trying to create perfection." Elena studied the Drakened carefully. His scales had developed a metallic sheen, and what looked like fiber optic filaments ran beneath them in complex patterns. "Perfection according to whose standards?" "Individual optimization," Crow replied, moving with uncanny grace. "The templates adapt to each species' unique physiology, enhancing natural strengths while compensating for weaknesses." "But the humans?" He gestured to Captain Chen's cocoon. "Their adaptability triggered something unexpected. The templates recognized their potential for further evolution." Zavor's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of deep thought that Elena had learned to recognize. The armor testing facility. Our research into adapting protection for different species. We were stumbling toward something the ancients had already mastered. But at what cost? Elena demanded, noting how the transformed surfaces of the medical bay seemed to respond to their conversation, pulsing with patterns that almost looked like data streams. This isn't just enhancement, it's fundamental transformation. The crew didn't consent to this. Consent? Krau's laugh held an odd harmonic quality. Did humanity consent to evolve from primitive mammals? Did any species choose its path of development? The templates offered directed evolution, conscious advancement beyond biological limitations. A groan from Captain Chen's cocoon interrupted them. The structure was becoming more transparent, revealing the extent of his transformation. His skin had developed a subtle metallic sheen similar to Krau's scales, but the changes went deeper. Elena's scanner showed enhanced muscle density, reinforced bone structure, and something else, neural modifications that defied analysis. The ship, Chen's voice was rough but clear as the cocoon began to dissolve. I can feel it. All of it. The systems, the crew, were becoming something new. Something more. Elena shared a look with Zavor. This went far beyond their research into cross-species medical adaptation. The ancient civilization hadn't just been studying different species, they'd been working to transcend the very concept of distinct species altogether. The templates, Elena said slowly, watching as more cocoons throughout the medical bay began to show signs of activity. They're not just changing individuals. They're creating a new kind of ecosystem. One where organic and inorganic, individual and collective, all blend together. Zavor moved closer to one of the pulsing walls, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding caution. The ship itself is becoming a kind of nervous system. But look at these patterns, they're not random. They're preserving individual consciousness while creating a network of shared experience. A bridge, Krau nodded. Between species, between states of matter, between different forms of existence. The ancients discovered that true adaptation requires more than just physical enhancement. It requires understanding, deep, intrinsic understanding of other perspectives. The implications were staggering. Elena thought of their armor research, how they'd struggled to account for different species' physiological needs. But this was solving the problem from the opposite direction. Instead of creating external protection, it was enabling internal adaptation. A new alert sounded from Elena's scanner. The transformation was spreading throughout the ship at an accelerating rate. More crew members were entering the chrysalis state, each one's changes uniquely tailored to their species' baseline biology. We need to make a decision, Elena said, looking at Zavor. This could be the greatest breakthrough in medical science since the discovery of genetic engineering. Or it could be the end of what makes each species unique. Zavor's response was cut off by a sudden shift in the ship's ambient lighting. The bioluminescent patterns intensified, forming what looked like neural pathways throughout the medical bay. Captain Chen, now fully emerged from his cocoon, placed a hand against one of the walls. The patterns responded to his touch, creating a cascade of light and information. You don't have to decide anything, Chen said, his voice carrying new harmonics that reminded Elena of Krau's transformed speech. The templates, they don't force change. They offer potential. Each individual, each species, chooses how far to adapt, how much to integrate. Elena's scanner beeped again, this time detecting changes in the very air around them. The ship's atmosphere was being modified, adjusted to create optimal conditions for all species simultaneously. Impossible by conventional engineering standards, but the templates were rewriting those standards with every passing moment. Our research, Zavor said thoughtfully, we were asking the wrong questions. It's not about how to protect different species in shared environments. It's about how to help them adapt to each other. The medical bay continued to pulse with life and information as more crew members emerged from their transformative states. Each one was changed, yet somehow still fundamentally themselves. The templates weren't erasing differences, they were creating bridges between them. Elena looked at her scanner, then at the transformed crew members, and finally at Zavor. They had come seeking answers about an ancient civilization's supposed weapons. Instead, they had found something far more powerful, the key to true interspecies cooperation. But as the transformation continued to spread throughout the ship, one question remained: were they ready for such a fundamental change in what it meant to be human, e.g., Drakend, or any other species? The answer, Elena suspected, would depend on whether they could learn from the ancients' wisdom without repeating whatever mistakes had led to their disappearance. The next few hours would prove crucial in determining not just the fate of the Horizon's crew, but possibly the future of all spacefaring species. Evolution's edge. The transformed medical bay of the Horizon had become a nexus of impossible biology. Elena watched as Lieutenant Maya Chen's voice came through their comm system, her tone a mixture of concern and fascination. "Multiple vessels approaching our position," Maya reported. "Looks like Galactic Defense Command picked up the Horizon's change in energy signature. They're treating this as a potential containment scenario." Captain Chen's enhanced nervous system seemed to interface directly with the ship's systems. "They're right to be cautious," he said, neural patterns rippling through the living walls around them. "What's happening here? It's beyond anything in current protocols." "We need to make a decision," Elena said, looking at her scanner's latest readings. "The transformation is stable in those who've undergone it, but it's still spreading through the ship's systems. If those vessels dock, they risk exposure," Zavor finished, his scales shifting to a deeper red. "But that may not be the worst outcome. Look at these neural pattern analyses." Elena studied the data on his scanner. The transformed crew members weren't just changing physically, their minds were expanding, integrating with both the ship's systems and each other while somehow maintaining their individual identities. It was a level of consciousness that defied current understanding of neural science. Dr. Martinez, Krau's harmonious voice cut through her thoughts. "Your expertise in cross-species medical adaptation makes you uniquely qualified to understand what's happening here. The templates, they're not just transforming us. They're fulfilling the potential that was always there." A new alert sounded from Elena's scanner. The approaching vessels were now close enough for detailed analysis. Her breath caught as she read the results. "The template's influence, it's already reaching beyond the horizon," she announced. "The energy patterns we're generating are causing subtle changes in the nebula's molecular structure. If those ships get too close, they'll begin their own transformation process," Captain Chen nodded. "The question is, do we try to stop it, or do we recognize this as the next step in evolution?" Zavor moved to one of the diagnostic terminals, his transformed scales reflecting the bioluminescent patterns around them. "Our research at the facility, we were working to help different species coexist. This technology doesn't just allow coexistence, it enables true understanding." Elena watched as more data streamed across her scanner. The transformed crew members were developing abilities that seemed almost mythical: cellular regeneration that could repair fatal injuries, neural networks that could process information at unprecedented speeds, and most incredibly, the ability to directly perceive and interact with other species' consciousness. "Incoming transmission from the lead vessel," Maya's voice announced. "They're demanding we explain the situation." Captain Chen placed his hand against one of the living walls, interfacing directly with the ship's communications. "This is Captain James Chen of the GSV Horizon. We've made contact with technology left behind by the ancient civilization from Proxima 7. It's not a weapon, it's an evolutionary tool." "The templates," Elena added, stepping closer to the communication interface, "they're designed to enhance each species according to their own biological framework. They're not forcing uniformity, they're enabling optimal adaptation while preserving individual identity." The response from the approaching vessels was immediate. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Karaf. Your ship's energy signature is unlike anything we've ever encountered. We cannot risk this spreading beyond containment. Prepare to be quarantined. Elena shared a look with Zavor. They both knew what quarantine protocols entailed. The Horizon would be sealed off, its crew studied like lab specimens. Everything they were learning about the template's true purpose would be lost in a haze of military paranoia. But before they could respond, something extraordinary happened. The transformed surfaces of the medical bay began emitting new patterns of bioluminescence, forming what looked like a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Within it, points of light pulsed in familiar patterns. These are other sights, Crowell breathed, his enhanced senses interpreting the display. Places where the ancient civilization left their templates. They're not just on Proxima 7, they're scattered throughout the galaxy, waiting to be found. Not waiting, Captain Chen corrected, his enhanced neural network processing the information. Growing. Evolving. The templates we found were just seeds. The changes we're experiencing, they're part of a larger pattern. Elena's scientific mind raced with the implications. The ancient civilization didn't disappear, she realized. They evolved beyond what we would recognize as life. And they left behind the means for others to follow. The approaching vessels were now close enough to see through the medical bay's viewport. Their sleek military designs seemed almost primitive compared to the organic-mechanical hybrid the Horizon had become. We need to show them, Zavor said suddenly. Not tell them, show them. The templates allowed direct sharing of experience. If we can establish a connection. It's risky, Elena cautioned. The military vessels might interpret any attempt to connect as an attack. But Captain Chen was already moving, his transformed physiology interfacing with the ship's systems in ways that bridged the gap between organic and mechanical. We're not asking permission, he said. We're offering understanding. The medical bay hummed with energy as the template's influence reached out toward the approaching ships. Elena's scanner showed the familiar patterns of transformation beginning to manifest in the nebula gases between the vessels. Multiple ships reporting unusual readings, Maya's voice came through again. Their sensor systems are changing. Elena watched in fascination as the transformation spread, not as an invasion or attack, but as an offering. The templates weren't forcing change, they were revealing potential that had always existed. Admiral Korath, Captain Chen broadcast, his voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space around them. Before you enact quarantine protocols, let us show you what we've discovered. Not through words or data, but through direct experience. The response was unexpected. Instead of retreat or aggression, the lead vessel's energy signature began to shift, showing the first signs of template integration. The ancient civilization's legacy was spreading, not through force, but through the simple act of revealing what was possible. As Elena watched the transformation begin to spread to the other vessels, she realized that their work at the armor testing facility had been just the beginning. They had been trying to protect different species from each other. The templates offered something far more profound, the ability to truly understand one another. But with that understanding came responsibility. The power to transform entire species, to bridge the gap between organic and mechanical, to evolve beyond current limitations, it was a power that could reshape the galaxy. The question was, were they ready for such power? And more importantly, could they learn from the ancient civilization's example without losing what made each species unique? The answers would come soon enough. For now, Elena and Zavor could only watch as the transformation continued to spread, carrying with it the potential for a new era of galactic evolution. Synthesis. 3 weeks after the initial contact with the templates, the Carina Nebula had become a hub of unprecedented scientific activity. The GSV Horizon, now more living entity than traditional spacecraft, had become the center of a growing fleet of transformed vessels. Elena stood in what had once been the medical bay, watching as representatives from dozens of species came to understand the true nature of the ancient civilization's legacy. The latest neural integration tests are complete, Zavor reported, his scaled form now enhanced with crystalline structures that seem to capture and redirect light itself. Each species continues to develop unique adaptations while maintaining their core identity. Elena nodded, reviewing the data on her own transformed interface system. The templates had changed her too, though she had chosen a more conservative level of enhancement than some. Her neural capacity had expanded, allowing her to process vast amounts of medical data simultaneously, while her cellular structure had been reinforced to survive in a wider range of environments. Admiral Karatha's transformation has stabilized, she noted, watching as the military leader interfaced with a group of newly arrived scientists. The Admiral's initial fear of the templates had transformed into cautious enthusiasm as he experienced firsthand their potential for understanding across species barriers. "We've identified 14 more template sites across the galaxy," Captain Chen announced, entering the bay with a grace that seemed to defy normal physics. "Each one appears to be calibrated for different environmental conditions." The ancients, they weren't just planning for one path of evolution. They were creating a network of possibilities. The implications were still unfolding. While some crew members had embraced extensive physical transformation, others had focused on neural enhancement or environmental adaptation. The templates respected individual choice while offering unprecedented possibilities for growth. "The armor testing facility seems almost quaint now," Elena mused, remembering their earlier research. "We were trying to protect different species from their environments. The templates instead teach species how to adapt to any environment." "Not just adapt," Kral corrected, his harmonious voice carrying new depths of understanding. "Thrive. Look at what we've learned about cellular regeneration alone. Injuries that would have been fatal can now be repaired in minutes. Diseases that plagued entire species can be eliminated through targeted genetic enhancement." Elena's transformed senses could perceive the complex network of connections that had developed throughout the fleet. Each ship, each crew member, maintained their individuality while participating in a greater whole. It was evolution not through competition, but through cooperation and understanding. "Incoming transmission from Galactic Defense Command," Maya announced, her consciousness now seamlessly integrated with her ship's systems. "They've reviewed our latest data package. The quarantine order has been officially lifted." A ripple of appreciation moved through the living walls around them. The templates had changed not just biology but the very nature of communication. Emotions, ideas, and experiences could be shared directly, breaking down barriers that had separated species for millennia. "We're detecting unusual activity from the nebula itself," Zavor reported suddenly. His enhanced senses picked up patterns that would have been invisible weeks ago. The template-modified gases, they're forming new structures. Everyone turned to watch as the purple and crimson clouds of the nebula began to shift, coalescing into shapes that seemed to bridge the gap between organic and inorganic matter. The ancient civilization's influence was spreading beyond individual ships and crews, beginning to transform space itself. "It's not just a technology," Elena realized, her enhanced mind processing the implications. "It's a fundamental shift in how matter and energy interact." The ancients didn't disappear, they transcended the very concepts of species and form. Captain Chen interfaced with the ship's systems, his consciousness expanding to encompass the growing network of transformed vessels. "The templates are showing us that evolution isn't a ladder to climb. It's a web of possibilities to explore. But with great possibility comes great responsibility," Admiral Karath added, his military training now enhanced by deep ecological understanding. "We need to ensure this knowledge spreads safely, that species and individuals can choose their own path of adaptation." Elena moved to one of the living interfaces that had once been a standard medical console. The templates had transformed their understanding of healing itself. Instead of fighting against the body's natural processes, they could now work with them, enhancing and directing natural adaptation. "The armor testing facility," she said thoughtfully, "it should become our first template integration center. A place where species can come to understand these changes before embracing them." "A bridge between old and new," Zavor agreed. where we can study both the physical and psychological aspects of transformation. Help individuals and species find their optimal path of development. The medical bay hummed with collective agreement. The templates had given them the power to transcend their original limitations, but they had also taught them the importance of maintaining identity within change. Evolution didn't have to mean losing what you were, it could mean becoming a better version of yourself while gaining the ability to truly understand others. We should prepare for the arrival of the science fleet, Elena said, noting the approach of dozens of research vessels. They'll have questions about everything from cellular mechanics to consciousness integration. Questions we're uniquely qualified to answer, Captain Chen nodded. Having experienced the transformation ourselves, we can guide others through the process. The nebula continued its strange dance outside the viewport, its gases forming patterns that seemed to echo the neural networks developing within the transformed ships. The ancient civilization had left them more than just tools or templates, they had left them a new way of understanding life itself. To think, Elena said, sharing a look with Zavor, we started by trying to design better armor. Now we're helping species transcend the need for external protection altogether. The EEG's transformed scales shimmed with amusement. Sometimes the best protection comes from understanding rather than armor. The ancients knew that. Now we do too. As the science fleet drew closer, Elena reflected on how far they'd come from those first armor tests. They had sought to protect different species from their environments and each other. Instead, they had discovered a way to help species adapt and grow together, maintaining their unique identities while gaining the ability to truly understand one another. The templates hadn't just changed their bodies or their ships. They had changed their understanding of what was possible. And as the transformation continued to spread through the nebula, Elena knew they were witnessing not the end of their species, but the beginning of something far more extraordinary, a galaxy where difference and unity could finally coexist in perfect harmony. The future was no longer about survival of the fittest, but about adaptation through understanding. And as she watched the next group of ships approach the template zone, Elena knew that their work, their real work, was just beginning.